Hello, Phil Croshaw here again from Passions, and in this episode we're going to be welcoming Shami Kalra to the show to talk watches and motor racing. Enjoy.
Omologato watch is totally inspired by motorsport, a sport I absolutely am passionate about. It relies on so many different components. All these people come together and they create something for somebody to go off and race. GTO stands for Gran Turismo Omologato, which means your Gran Turismo car has been homologated for racing. And it always reminded me of those long gone eras of, the Mille Miglia, the Tour de France. It evoked ideas of Sir Sterling Moss, John Surtees, and all these wonderful guys. And that was it. The name of the company had to be Omologato. The idea for Omologato came one evening. Totally jaded with what I was doing. I had an argument with my lovely wife that evening. We had a bottle of wine. I said I have to go in a different direction. I'm bored with all the corporate stuff that I was up to, and I really needed to get my brain thinking again because I'm a designer by trade. I studied at the London College of Fashion, so I was a very creative person, but over the years, because a lot of the corporates give you the money, you have to go after that. That pressure had come off a bit. So I sat down in my office, in my study, from about 7 o'clock in the evening, and I came out at 11 o'clock at night, and I thought to myself, I think I've got the most amazing idea. Having created watches people before, with their logos and with their names, I did some designs, I came up with the idea. By Tuesday evening, I'd launched the website with the designs of the first 4 watches we launched. I sat back and thought, let's just see what happens. It was just an idea at the time. And then suddenly my phone started making noises saying, you've made a sale. And it happened that night, probably another 6 times. People were interacting immediately and saying, these designs are just amazing.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to this edition of Passions. And today I'm delighted to be welcoming my guest, Shami Kalra. And Shami is from Omologato Watches. I've not got that right, have I, Shami?
Well, it's a good first attempt. That's cool.
It's a good. After all that, I practiced it at first and then got it wrong again. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Thank you very much indeed for joining me today. Tell us a bit about yourself and what your passion is.
Well, I've got quite a few passions. One of them, people may or may not know, but I love motorsport. I always have done. Since I can remember, I've always been watching it on TV or visiting tracks or going to go-kart places, and etc., etc. So I've always loved motorsport. My livelihood has always been making watches. So I'm passionate about making sure that my watches are, of a certain quality, of a certain caliber, etc., etc. And what I did a few years ago was put both of those passions together, my livelihood and my passion, and thankfully, I'm able to say that I make money out of both things now, which is it's taken me a long time to get here, but it's really nice to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic to be able to take 2 passions. A lot of people never ever get to make any kind of living out of their one passion, but
Right.
to be able to fuse the 2 together, I think is just absolutely awesome. So tell me about the watchmaking story. Did you kind of were you like 4 years old making watches, or how did all that come about?
It was all. I mean, it was almost all opportunity. I actually studied at the London College of Fashion for design, so I haven't studied in Switzerland horology or anything like that. I studied design and fashion back in the late 80s at the London College of Fashion in London. And I started my first small business when I was 23, where we were doing clothing, ironically, for a motorsport team. So we were doing all their jackets and various other things which I was designing. And then they asked me, whether I could make them some watches to give to the team. So I suddenly thought, well, I'm sure I can find something. And so after a quick scout, there was no internet back then. So it took me probably about 4 or 5 months to find the right supplier, who incidentally is still my friend today. I'm a bit
Wow.
old, 23 now, but he's still a friend and he still makes watches for me. He's a Swiss guy. He was based out of Switzerland at the time, but with a factory in Japan. And I said to him, listen, I've got this motorsport team. They really want a lovely watch. And he said, yeah, I can do that for you. And he was just starting out. He was a lot younger. And literally that one order started the passion for it and the designing for it, because all I'd ever done before was design clothing. And then over the years, the clothing side of it disappeared, and I allowed the watch side of it, to the extent that we were making watches for Rolls-Royce. So if you pick up your Phantom next week, Phil, we're still making them, or the factory's still making them for Rolls-Royce now. We've done Audi Motorsport, so they won Le Mans on a Sunday and call us on a Monday and say, right, we need 100 limited editions. So we used to do a lot of contract work like that. Never our own brand, or never my own brand. It was always making for other people. And then that business started not dying off, but with the smart watch. Actually, they're not watches. They're the smart iPads that you wear on your wrist. People started wanting information on their wrist rather than personality, because you never see a picture of an Apple Watch on Instagram, right? Ever.
Yeah.
How much personality those iPads for your wrist are. Anyway, so a lot of people went towards that. So what we were doing and how we were doing was becoming less and less. So it's coming up to 6 years ago now. I thought, well, business wasn't great on the other side. It was really bad, actually, very bad. So I thought I'd just give this a go and see whether it works. And here we are, nearly 6 years later, and we're in we are in the top 5 most profitable British watch brands. So it's working. We've got a lot more to do. We've only just scratched the surface, but we got a lot more to do.
Funnily enough, I was due to get the Phantom delivered the other day, but COVID's delayed it.
Really?
Unfortunately.
I wonder why they cancelled one watch.
Yeah, I think I'll aspire to own one of your watches as opposed to a Phantom. I think that's the realistic way of looking at it. Anyway, what a fantastic story! And what I find interesting about that is how you had to adapt. Would you say, when you look back to the way the market was changing, would you say that you had a finger on the pulse in terms of that change? And did you notice it and spot it relatively soon, or did it kind of creep up on you a little bit, would you say?
No. For 18 months, I was flogging a dead donkey, and I sometimes refusing to admit defeat is the biggest problem business people have. We become so emotionally attached to everything that we have. The minute someone says you're doing something wrong, you take it as offense. And for about 18 months, I think, maybe even less, a little bit less than that, but I was taking offense that people were saying that I was doing things wrong. The proof was that our bank balance was disappearing. So that's the obvious thing. When you're doing something wrong, you run out of money. If you're doing something right, you have a great cash flow and it carries on. So there's no other way of judging whether you're doing something right or not, in my mind, anyway. So I did get it wrong. I didn't admit defeat, and then sort of sitting there on a Friday afternoon, and this is a well-documented story. Actually, a few people have asked me this before. So if someone's watched this before or heard this before, I'm sorry, but Friday morning we were sitting there with £9.61 in the bank, 2 children to feed, and Saturday, Sunday, no money's coming in from any of our corporate customers or anything like that. So what do you do? So it was a tough day. So in the morning, I just started doodling. Actually, no, it was the afternoon that I just started doodling and playing around with watch designs. And I think it was a Grand Prix weekend as well in June. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be nice on a watch dial? And I looked at it and I thought, bloody hell, I'd buy that. And then I did another one. And I thought, bloody hell, I'd buy that too. And so over the weekend, I got a very simple Shopify account. So we made a website, 30 days free trial. So I thought nothing ventured, nothing gained sort of thing. I had a PayPal account, set it all up, made my own website, and it went live on Tuesday when we were down to about £3 in the account. All right. So it was tough. So Tuesday it went live. I put it on my Twitter and various other social media accounts that I've got, saying, have a look at these watches. The second tweet I sent out was retweeted 2,500 times. So suddenly I had this audience, and I could see from the analytics that I've installed on the website, getting between sort of, on the first day, I think we got like 80 or 90 visitors of the website. The second day was 200. So we're down to £3 on Tuesday, right? Thursday, about 7:36 p.m. in the evening.
You remember it well, don't you?
Yeah. Got my first sale, and it was £900. From, and I literally I couldn't believe it. By the end of that day, I'd done £1,200. The next day I did 1,000. The next day I did 1,000. Within a week, I sold a month's worth of watches that we could make. Within a month, I'd sold 3 months worth. And within 2 months, I sold 6 months worth of production. So it literally, from that Friday morning, wondering what to do and just playing around with the design software that I had, to a week later, from £9.61 to a week later, I think I had £3,500 from a new idea. And as I say, I've never looked back, but I never forget. Never forget those times. I've had some amazing journeys. I've had some amazing partnerships. We were on the side of a McLaren in 2020. We were partners with IndyCar teams, Formula E teams. We're in negotiation with Formula One teams at the moment, or a Formula One team. We're official timepiece partners for Monza. We've been awarded Silverstone, although that one needs a bit more paperwork to be done. But in principle, we've agreed that. Watkins Glen in the US, Laguna Seca. So the brand in 6 years, it's all been fueled by me, because I'm a nutter when it comes to motorsport and getting the right authentic activation. Like we just done Dakar recently. Dakar rally. We had 3 buggies entered in the actual rally. Sorry, let me just get rid of that.
That's okay, no problem.
Cool. Sorry. So we had 3 buggies entered in the Dakar rally, but not only did we sponsor the buggies, we actually installed 16 watches into the buggies, and so our Dakar watch raced Dakar, which to me, that's authentic. So now when you're sitting at a dinner party and someone pulls out a Rolex and said, I bought this from Altrincham High Street and it cost me 10 grand, you could say, well, this cost me a few £100 and this watch has actually done the Dakar. So it's that kind of activation that I love, and as a fan, I would love to do. I love doing, So yeah,
it sounds. It's what an amazing story, and it sounds very much like you really understand the importance of story in your journey. Because that for me that's what I preach to my clients all the time about. Find the story, which is what will resonate with people, and that's a cracking story, isn't it?
Phil, I sell something nobody wants. No, sorry, not nobody wants. Nobody needs. Nobody needs. So I'm wearing today. You can see that. Put it up to the camera.
Yeah,
that's a £300 watch. That's the one that I went to East Africa and did the East African Safari Rally in. So we've got photographs of it doing the rally. We've got photographs of it in the middle of Mombasa and Kilifi and Nairobi, and Tanzania, and all the rest of it. It's a £300 watch. But every time I look at it, it reminds me of Kenya. It reminds me of racing, and I have if you instill a story into a product, not just, hey, do you want to buy a watch? Because you automatically think, oh, I don't need one. I don't need it. But the minute you put something like, I don't know, the McLaren IndyCar logo on it, and the IndyCar drivers are wearing it, you put Silverstone on it, you put Monza onto it. The amount of lovely stories I've heard from Watkins Glen in America, from American people, from American customers, sorry, where they said, oh, my dad took me when I was 8 years old. He used to race his race car number 56. Have you got number 56? I'd really love to buy it of you, because we number them as well. So suddenly that, every time he looks at the time, it's not telling him the time. It's reminding him of his dad. It's reminding him of his race car. It's reminding him of the first time they went to a racetrack. Or we do the Derek Bell watch, and Derek is Derek's a 5-time Le Mans winner, if nobody knows. He's one of the most successful British racing drivers. He's, I think, 78 or 70. He won't thank me for this, but he's about late 70s. And he's one of the most endeared and celebrated British racing drivers. He's one of our ambassadors. He's a good friend now. We text each other every week. You know, he gives me advice. I give him advice. He's a lovely chap. But the minute we put Derek Bell onto a watch, his whole fan base, his whole community of people who engage with him wanted that watch. And we only made 500 of them. And I think we've got about 10, 15 left, and that's it, sort of thing. So you put a story into something, suddenly people want it. Sorry, not want it, engage with it. So, and that's important to me. A lot of businesses, and anyone who's watching this, people don't need to buy from you. They don't need to buy from you. You've got to tell them why they need to buy from you. And I see a lot of watch brands just saying, especially on Instagram, every day I see adverts, you know, here's a watch, £300, buy it. Well, no, I don't need it. Why do you want me to buy it? There's no story behind selling something. You know, it's even like with a car. Car companies, I don't know whether your audience know about car companies, but you know, there are some car companies where they give you no reason to buy it apart from they give it to you with massive discounts and free finance. Whereas the minute you get a car with a story, maybe like a Porsche, or because they race on a Sunday and they sell on a Monday, right? That resonates in me. We always race our watches on a Sunday, and the minute we put it on our social media and onto our website, they sell on a Monday. And so that kind of transition from telling the story to actually bringing in money, a lot of companies don't do that. And I don't understand why people, well, I'm glad many other companies haven't picked it up, because it'd be competition for me, but the authenticity of what you're selling is the most important thing.
And what was it that, can you remember a time when you really started to pick this up? I mean, is this something you understood back in the day when you were designing, when you were in fashion? Or was there almost an aha moment, or was it just common sense to you that this would be a better way of selling?
No, it wasn't conscious the way of doing it. It was just a way that sort of progressed. I was jaded with corporate world. I hated it. The buyers were getting younger and younger, less and less knowledgeable, more and more patronizing. And as you get older, right, you can't tolerate that kind of. I can't tolerate.
So true. I'm the same.
Yeah, well, you don't need to tolerate it, and any company that does tolerate it needs to close the account down, because I should have done that with a lot of people in the past. But towards the end of the corporate stuff that I was doing, I was actually turning away more work than I should have been, because I couldn't handle people's attitudes. So I felt that I'd always had a story to tell. You know, I'd go to. Not that I'm a know-it-all or anything like that, but when people start telling you more than you know, you have to sort of suck it and just be quiet, sort of thing. I knew that I wanted to tell people that I knew a lot more than I wanted to. And so when the watches started and I started talking about my knowledge of racing, well, every time I tweeted, every time I Instagram, we made money. So I suddenly thought, well, actually, people are engaging with the fact that I know, well, I don't know all of it. I mean, I've got friends who are absolutely amazing Wikipedias in their head, you know, but I do know my stuff, and to be able to translate that into a product, the money almost becomes a buy thing. I look at the bank account every morning and every afternoon just to make sure the transactions are all okay. But money is not my motivation. It really isn't. I mean, a lot of us have obviously been stuck indoors for nearly 12 months, but if you, previous to the 12 months, if you look at all our social media sort of to 2019 to even February 2020, I was at a racetrack every Saturday and Sunday morning because I couldn't believe I was getting invitations to things that I used to queue up for and I couldn't afford to go to. And now people are handing me out, passes. So to me, that is the currency. That to me is the win for the business, because I'm allowed to be where I've always dreamt of being. And it's almost like, what's that? Imposter syndrome. You sort of stand there thinking, any minute now I'm going to get chucked out. So to me is the most important part of the business, is doing what I've always dreamt of doing. And I know, and I watched a seminar with an American guy the other day, was saying, no one who's got no money in the bank says follow your passions. Only rich people say follow your passions, which, yeah, he's right to a certain extent, but I disagree, because I got a whiff of my passion, I got a whiff of an audience, and I followed it, and I did make money out of it. So, you've got to remain commercial, because if you follow your passion full stop, you won't have any money.
Yeah.
You've got to remain commercial.
I think that's also the case, isn't it, with performers, actors, singers, bands, all that kind of thing. It's they're very, very passionate about playing, but at the end of the day, I guess they still have to pay the bills.
Yeah.
But I think what's possibly criminal is that throughout a lifetime, you don't at least have a go. And following your passions and making maybe a living out of your passions. I mean, especially today, and I've talked to a few people on these shows about what in effect now is side hustles. We live in the age of the internet. If you're passionate enough about it, you will do it when you come home from work at 6 o'clock. You will put 3 or 4 hours in developing something, and because you can do it on the internet, you don't need necessarily, and you don't need £100,000 to start a business anymore, do you?
No, my business is self-financed. We got a bit of help from, we use PayPal. So PayPal working capital has been absolutely brilliant to catapult the business. You don't have to speak to a bank manager, hand in management accounts and all the rest of it. 3 clicks and there's money in your account. So that's helped us finance it. But that only came in about 2 or 3 years after the business was established. But I started that like I said, I started with less than a tenner in the bank, and everything was available to me with 30 days free trial. So, I had knowledge on Photoshop, and I had knowledge on making visuals and stuff. And I had knowledge with supply chains and good supply chains, because I'd known them for years. But yeah, I often hear, and every week I get a friend or somebody from out of the blue saying, listen, I really want to start a business. I need to borrow £10,000. Well, what the hell do you need 10 grand for to start? You just don't. And I've got a friend who's been running an internet business now for 5 years and still hasn't made a penny and still looking for another 20 grand. Well, you don't need it. If you've got a good idea and you've got reliable suppliers are your lifeline. And that's the one thing a lot of businesses don't appreciate. And I felt like that when I was doing my corporate stuff. The younger, I'm not being patronizing, just call them less experienced people, not younger. The less experienced people thought that the supplier was someone disposable and they could just get on the internet and get somebody else, right? Whereas my supplier, who I've known since I was 23 years old, so that's how many years? 28 years this year, almost as long as my wife, I've known him. If something needs doing on a Friday afternoon at 6 o'clock, and I need something couriered somewhere, or I need something doing, he goes back into his office, right, Japanese time on Saturday morning when they're closed, and he'll do it for me. He literally has my back with everything. And this is what a lot of less experienced business people, and also people who work for companies, don't understand the importance of a supplier. They think the customer's the most important thing. It's not. You let a customer down because you've got a crappy supplier, you haven't got a customer, right? Whereas a lot of the less experienced, people are just saying, well, we've got to keep the customer happy. Got to keep, well, no, it's not the customer. You need to keep the supplier happy so you've got a good supply chain to make money. And that's what and I haven't been in the corporate world for a few years now, 6-7 years. And I don't know whether it's changing, especially with COVID. I don't know whether it's changing or not. But if you don't respect your supplier, you ain't got a business. Full stop.
Yeah,
And
no, I think that's just as true.
Yeah, a lot of new people need to understand that.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely just as true. And I guess it comes down to, I mean, going the extra mile, for example, there, the example you use is somebody going the extra mile, and trust must be a massive one as well. And it takes time to build relationships that are built on trust, doesn't it?
Phil, if you were a supplier, you were selling me coffee, I came into your coffee shop every morning, I swore at you, threw a fiver down, keep the change and walked out, right? You'd be going, oh, he's here again. Whereas if I came in the morning, asked you how your family was, started a relationship, asked for my change, said goodbye, have a great day, and all the rest of it, manners cost nothing, right? Who are you gonna treat well? The guy who just throws the fiver and says keep the change, or the guy who asks you how you are? So it's the relationship between you and your supplier and your customer. Customers sometimes they push it because everyone feels entitled, and I've noticed it a lot in the last 10 years. The more entitlement, the minute, I mean, we've got a situation now where someone's got the wrong watch delivered. We delivered, I don't know how many a week, but they got the wrong watch. The first thing they did was rant and rave and all that. I picked up the phone. I said, listen, hold on. This is a human error. We've got a couple of staff on furlough, so we're under pressure. And I said, listen, what's happened? Got the problem. I said, give me 24 hours and we'll have this whole situation sorted for you. And I'm going to give you a voucher for next time as well. Something the customer's really happy, but the sense of entitlement before I got to that point was I almost said, listen, give me the watch back, take your money, you're not getting anything from me again. And I've done that. In actual fact, people in the office say, can you stop talking to the customers now? Because I cannot tolerate people who don't have manners. It doesn't matter what you have. I don't care what your bank balance is. I don't care what you drive. I don't care whether you sweep the roads or you own the building. I don't care. But you got no manners. I ain't talking to you again. And there are some Formula One people on here, if they watch this. I don't know whether I'll punch them first or whether they punch me when I see them. Because manners cost nothing. And, you've got to maintain that relationship, firstly with your supplier and then obviously with your customer as well. But nobody can talk down to you. And that's what was happening in my corporate world. And I won't tolerate it. And I don't do it here. Everyone talks down to me in the office here, but I won't tolerate it. Anyone talking down to anybody or being rude or not being reasonable, they're not getting a watch from me. Full stop.
Do you know, I think that what that epitomizes is in effect is culture. It's values and culture, that what I call the way we do things around here. Yes. And that definitely comes from the top, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone's exactly the same in the office. It doesn't matter what you do here. And if we're busy, like we were really busy yesterday, I was packing and I enjoy packing. Actually, I back in the day, I used to say goodbye to all the watches, almost like they're with my kids. So every time I get involved, they still sit there. And then the other thing is, because we're sending out volume at the moment, we don't have time to do it. But I used to set the time to every country it was going to. So if it was going to Australia, I'd Google, let's say, Brisbane, and make sure it arrives on Brisbane time, that kind of stuff, those kind of details, which I still do now. And people often say to me, you're slowing us down. I'm like, no, this is what it should be like, We should be detail conscious in every single aspect of what we do. So there's no culture of, hey, I'm the boss, or everything stops at me. Sometimes unfortunately, most of the time fortunately, but there's no culture of you ain't got manners, you're out, finish. I don't care whether you're a supplier, you're a customer, you're an employee. If you haven't got any manners, you're out.
That is, I have to say to you, that's very, very refreshing to hear. I mean, it's really interesting that sometimes some of the things you've said today, I feel like I've almost like written a script for you. Could you talk about entitlement? I'm always wittering onto my wife about the problem. Part of the problem we've got in the world is the fact that everybody's entitled, and then there you are talking about entitlement. So would you say that you're a detail person then, Shami. You strike me as somebody who's into the detail, and that's possibly part of the reason why you've been so successful.
Yeah, I am detail conscious. I do care about every single aspect. Like, you know, we bought bubble wrap. We changed bubble wrap suppliers about 2 years ago, because you know, watching about all the plastic and everything else. So we now pay, I think, 30% more for our bubble wrap because it's biodegradable bubble wrap. That, you know, as a company, 30% more. Really, we shouldn't be paying that because we should be looking at the pennies, right? But I couldn't allow my conscience to send out plastic that's not biodegradable. You know, stuff like that means a lot to me. Where we source our leather from. Back in the day, I was a massive animal activist, and I still am. We still support animal charities and the ethics around it and all the rest of it. So the leather that we buy, you know, I go and source it from a proper supplier, because there are cheaper suppliers out there, but you don't know where the leather comes from. So details like that mean a lot to me because I have the chance to be able to make the change in my life and our company, and I have the ability to take my brand where I want to take it. And so yeah, you've got to be detail conscious with that, and if you're not, then yeah, then things do start falling apart. There's not one part of this business, not one part, and I'm talking about, you know, balance sheets. I'm talking about stock control. I'm talking about procuring supplies for packaging, movements, leather. I mean, you name it. Doing a deal, even with a team, contract work, and all the rest of it. Every single aspect. I know everything. Everything. So that sounds wrong. I know everything about our company. I'm learning every day. But there's no lawyer who can sit here and actually tell me, oh no, this is the way it's right or whatever. I've actually corrected our lawyer with our contractual thing in the past. But the thing is, and this sounds like I'm being a bit cocky. I'm not. It's because of the experience. And if you listen to people with experience, it can only make you better. My children sometimes get really pissed off with me. I don't know how to say that word, but they do.
Yeah, you can say it's fine.
I got myself into credit card debt when I was in my late 20s, and it was pretty bad. You know, it was almost, well, how the hell did I get here? And it was, you know, the interest alone was taking up all my income almost, and so I had to rely on this damn thing. So, I mean, big lesson, a few years more. Now I've taken charge of both of my kids' credit card. My son's very intelligent in the sense that he works for a bank, so he's very savvy with that kind of stuff, and he knows. But my daughter needs a bit of help. But I've taken charge of their credit cards. And they're saying, you're a control. I said, no, I've got experience of getting it wrong, and I really do not want you to get this wrong. And this is how you can go wrong. And in business, I've done exactly the same. And I have conversations like this with people at least once a week, where they've contacted me and said, listen, you know, we want to go into this. We want to start a watch company. We want to start a brand and whatever. The first thing I say is, why should someone buy from you? And they haven't got the answer. You know, oh, because we're cheap. Well, so is 3,000 other companies. They're cheap too. Why should they buy from you? So,
well, as a business consultant, you can imagine that comes up all the time when I ask the question, what's different about what you do?
yeah,
And very, very, very unusual. Can anybody actually say that? And that whole thing as well about the fact that, you know, you might be selling a very similar product, but at the end of the day, also your marketing and your brand development can be very different from the competition, which is arguably what you've done. As you've said, you know, it's a watch. We can go anywhere to get a watch, but your watches and your brand is special. Do you find that a lot of your business comes from word of mouth, would you say, as well? Do the people talk about it and show it each other and things like that?
Yeah, we have a voluntary survey at the end of our checkout, which tells us how you've heard about it. And constantly, I'd say in the top 5, it does say people do click word of mouth. And so yeah, it is word of mouth. Although we do a hell of a lot of advertising, and I run a Twitter account which has over 3 million impressions a month, so that helps. And that's just me being grumpy about motorsport. Yeah, so I do get told off And I have had high level emails saying delete that tweet now, or we'll instruct our lawyers. And invariably, I'd say 9 times out of 10, I haven't deleted it. I just said, well, do what you have to do. But it's never litigious or anything like that. It's just passion. I just feel strongly about stuff, and when people are getting things wrong, then I'm happy to talk about it. So I mean,
well, I can see that in this interview. You know, you're very candid about your experiences, and I've spoken to a few entrepreneurs over the years in interviews, and a lot of them say that people have got really no idea what they've been through in order to get where they are. You know, almost people's perceptions sometimes is that they fall out of the sky like Mr. Bean with 100 million quid in the bank. Yeah. You know, and it's because it's nothing like that. They've got a story behind it of debts and broken relationships and marriages. And
listen, every time I go to Tesco's and my card goes through, I still do a little dance in my head. Yeah, so you never forget those days. And the thing is, if you start forgetting those days and just keep looking at your bank balance, thinking you're better than people, then you will lose it. And I have to admit, in my late 20s, early 30s, I did make a lot of money. I had some fantastic contracts. I was young. So, you know, the shiny stuff started turning up. The attitude became cocky. And then when I started losing it in my mid-30s, because things weren't going so well, it was not badly, but they weren't going as well. But I was still, you know, earning a good wage. You sort of start thinking, well, actually, that wasn't important. Why was I acting like that? And now, honestly, ask me for a tenner on a night out. Ask me. You won't get it.
I also find, I don't know if you find this as well, but I think as you get older as well, your instincts become a lot stronger. And sometimes I'll say to something to people, I'll say, I can tell you exactly how that's going to play out. You know, and they'll laugh and say, for crying out loud, Phil, you're not Nostradamus. I say, no, but my gut is screaming at me. And not all the time, but the number of times where, you know, you said that was going to happen. Well, did you have a crystal ball or something? I said, no, it's just experience, and I can just see how it's going to play out. And quite often, it gets more accurate almost every year that goes by.
Yeah. I mean, I failed. Let me think. I failed twice in businesses in my life. One was a bad business partner, where I had to take tough decisions because I was left with a whole load of debt. So I had to make a bad decision. It wasn't a great decision, but I had to do it. The second time around was because I didn't admit to myself that the industry I was in was dying and the margins were disappearing. So choose your partners wisely. Make sure that the debt that you put to your name is something that you can pay back, not everybody else, but just you. And that was a big lesson. And then the second time around is when things are going wrong, you've got to admit to yourself that you're going wrong. And if you don't, and if you live this sort of like, oh, it'll get better. Yeah, it probably will, but it'll probably cost you another 100 grand to get it better. You know, so if you can afford to lose that, then great. If you can't afford to lose it, then walk and try something else, or adapt your business to what you're doing, sort of thing. And we've all seen that in the last 12 months. Retailers like what's the one, Primark, they're suffering badly because they always said that we're never going to go online, and they still haven't gone online now. So and you know, in 6 months' time, when they're laying off thousands of people, it's not going to be rocket science. Why is it?
It's staggering, though, isn't it? It's staggering that
staggering stupidity of the management there.
Yeah,
it's the easiest thing to do. Get 20 people, get 20 web people onto it today. You can get a web presence in about, let's say, a month, maybe 2 months or whatever, because it's going to be technical with Primark because it's such a big inventory. But you've got to get online. Look at boohoo.com. The guys in Manchester are killing it because it's just all online. You know, and they bought Debenhams yesterday, which was suffering 2 years ago because they didn't change their business. COVID's obviously killed it, but Boohoo bought them. They see value in it. They give £55 million just for the name, so they can see value in it. Why the hell couldn't the management of Debenhams see that? So you've got to adapt, and you've got to admit immediately. Immediately in businesses is short term, is within 3 months. You're getting it wrong. Change. You know?
Do you think that part of the issue, particularly small businesses, is there is sometimes that message, and it tends to be covered up quite a bit in books, or it certainly has been in the past in business books and such like, never give up, never give up, never give up. And do you think people misinterpret that and think that, you know, and don't think that never give up means keep hold of the iceberg even though it's going down fast?
No, I tell you what, it should be, and I'm only just thinking about this now because it might sound scripted. Failure is an option.
Yeah.
It's an option. You know, and failure is not failure. Failure is just learning. You know, I read something years ago, you probably heard it, you know, you either win or you learn. There's no failure. You don't lose, you just learn. You know, and if you can, you know, so failure is an option, and if you fail, it's not a problem. The first time I failed, honestly, I think I sat in bed for 5 days depressed. Literally, I've lost everything, or I'm losing everything. I didn't lose my house or anything, but I could have, or could have. And but you know, failure is an option, and you're allowed to fail. That's the only way we learn. You know, yeah, you fall off your bike when you're 4 years old, 5 years old. It doesn't mean don't get on a bike again, does it? You know,
No. Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's obviously where resilience comes in as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, and I also think, and I see this in my business, in business consultancy, where people become so emotionally attached to the business that they can't see when it's time to take a different direction or call it a day and move on to something else, because the market's collapsing. And of course, the speed in which markets collapse and change now is massive, you know, isn't it? I mean, it's so probably overly used as an example, but I was mentioning it to somebody the other day about it's not that long that Amazon have been around, and yet they're delivering now just about anything you can imagine to people's doorsteps everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And it's what, I don't know, what, 30 years old maybe?
1999. So what's that? 22.
I mean, you know, it's just absolutely staggering when you think about it.
You know,
So do you think people do get emotionally attached to the point where they maybe
I've got a
not
friend
making
who had
right
a
decisions?
store in Essex who just did clothing for children, and the store was doing okay. You know, Harrods have an exclusive store for children, and so he wanted to emulate that, but outside. He started mail order about 3 years ago. He's now turning over nearly £17 million just on children's clothing because he did mail order. He adapted. He looked at what everyone was doing. He looked at what, you know, things like people like Amazon were doing. We've been doing mail order for well, we only do online because we couldn't get a distributor. Now we've got distributors; they're all closed. But because we were online only last year, our business went up 297% just because of online. You know, so it was an eye opener with how it grew. People are not buying train tickets and £5 coffees every day. You know, £7 lunches, that kind of stuff. So there was, and this January, I read a report where people had more disposable income in this January than they have had in God knows how many years, because they're not buying annual rail cards. They're not buying whatever they need to buy to get to work. They're not spending the money. So there is a lot of, despite what the Daily Mail will tell you every morning, there is a lot of money out there, and people are spending it because everyone wants a bit of reward, right? We all want something. And that little glimmer of, in business also, this is another thing that it resonates in my mind because somebody in America told me this many years ago. As humans, we only need two things, right? The first one's we need to belong to something. We all need to belong, whether it be the golf club, whether it be we all shop in Waitrose, whether it be you wear a logo on your jumper or on your t-shirt. That shows a sense of belonging. Whether you wear one of my watches, there's a sense of belonging to something. That identity has been taken away from us in the last 12 months. And that's why a lot of people, you need to belong to a family. You need to belong to a social scene, a pub, a restaurant. Friday night, we'll go to the restaurant. The guy says, hello to me, Mr. Smith, come and have your usual table. You belong to that restaurant. That sense of belonging is a human emotion we all need. You get excluded from a birthday party, you're not invited. How do you feel? Not great, right? We all want to belong. The second thing that humans need, and this has also been taken away from us to a certain extent in the last 12 months with the pandemic, we all need hope. There's no point in being a billionaire on a Monday, but you've got terminal illness where you're going to pass away on a Friday. There's no hope. So, you know, everyone thinks that, you know, all we need is a million quid in the bank. It's not. We only need those two things. And if you install the sense of belonging into what you're selling, right? So you bought a car from a showroom. Okay, great. So you bought a Ford Fiesta, right? You love Ford. You love what it stands for. Your dad used to buy it. Your granddad used to drive one. Your mum has one, etc., etc. So you belong to that. I bought the same brand. I'm in the same club as the rest of my family. My neighbors have got one. They're going to come over and say, congratulations for buying that car because I identify with it. Then you need hope. So he's bought the entry-level model. Ford now need to install hope into him to buy the next model up, the faster one with the bigger wheels or whatever. We all want that hope to upgrade to a Focus, or we all want the hope to buy that house in the area that we've always dreamt of. If you take those two things away from people, we're nothing. We're nothing. And so brands need to be doing those two things. And when that guy told me this about 10 years ago in America, I suddenly thought, you're absolutely right. So we need to belong. And if you see how many people on social media post pictures of their watches on Instagram and, oh, I met somebody. So we've got a coffee shop in Windsor where if you come to our coffee shop, you show your watch, you get a free coffee. We're now sending out Team Omologato cards, which are just sort of small credit cards, where if you go to any of the racetrack or partners we sponsor around the world, you show your card, they give you either free lunch, 10% off tickets, special access, come to the pit garage, you know, come and have a sit inside the Ferrari that we're racing around Monza. You're suddenly part of something. And that's what I've instilled into the brand, is that you become part of what we call hashtag Team Omologato. And a lot of my customers use that. And then the hope is, if you bought a £99 watch from me, we also do a £600 watch. The hope is that one day you might want to come along and buy the more expensive watch. You know, that's the hope. And also one day you will be able to afford it, because we've been talking 45 minutes. I waffle a lot, so you might want to edit this. But one thing that sticks in my mind also is I went to the British Grand Prix when I was about 29, 30 years old or whatever it was. And it cost us just over 2.5 months worth of Tesco money, right? I couldn't afford a hamburger or a Coke that day, but my son had the hamburger and Coke. I had to look for water fountains. I didn't see a racing driver. It was the first Grand Prix I'd ever been to, right? I was so excited. I didn't see one Grand Prix driver. I was excluded from everything because I didn't spend enough money. To me, it was a lot of cash to get in there. And then I saw a watch which was £3,000, a motorsport watch, which was displayed there. Firstly, I didn't belong to that day because I didn't have enough money to belong. And secondly, I had no hope of getting the watch that I really wanted. So that day I walked away and I thought, well, what is motorsport about? I was so disillusioned by the whole experience that I never want to feel like that again. And I don't want my customers to feel like that. If you want a motorsport watch that guy, you know, who's driving a McLaren around the Indy 500 is wearing, actually, you've got the hope you can afford it. And despite the fact that you may earn, I don't know, a couple of $1,000 a month or £1,500 a month or whatever, you've still got the hope that you're going to have the same watch as one of your heroes. That to me is the two fundamental human things coming into play. And that's the other thing you need to do with any business. Give people the hope. You know, if they're coming for a Fiesta entry level, make sure that you give them a test drive in the ST, or you give them a test drive in the top of the range Focus. They may not be able to afford it now, but you've given them hope and you've given them dreams to come back and spend more money with you. And I don't understand brands that don't do that. This exclusivity of, hey, look at me, I'm on a yacht, I'm wearing a 700 grand, you know, watch, and you're thinking, well, who cares? And I'm not. It's 99.9% of the population don't care, and they have no hope of ever getting there. So why show it off?
Yeah, I think that's so true. And hearing you talk about that whole idea of the tribe, I think I really buy into. And of course, listening to you talk about that, the biggest brand I think of who were probably the geniuses, or the man that was the genius, was Apple. You know, that's as I perceive it, that's exactly what Steve Jobs did. You know, it's created that feeling of hope and that feeling of a tribe. And if you owned a Mac, you were part of the Mac Club, and
Yeah,
he was a genius at it.
yes, yeah. But he was also a guy that everyone could relate to, because he didn't. I mean, Bill Gates has done a great job of that as well, where you can just look at the guy and relate to him. You know, if you look at some entrepreneurs who've flying around the world in sort of private jets and sticking it on Instagram and all the rest of it, yeah, if you're 10, you might be impressed. If you get to our age, it's not. You know, and if you get to, you just think, well, you're just alienating people. You shouldn't be doing that. I mean, you know, I like nice things like everybody else, but I do collect nice things, and I do have nice things, but you don't sit there shoving it in people's faces. If you feel that they don't connect with it or whatever, you've just got to relate to your customers as well. Remember that I sell £300 watches, £400 watches. You know, you can't. I don't get people who made the money and then stick a whole load of material stuff, and then you've got to relate to your customer. If you're selling Bentleys, obviously, if you're driving around in a Fiesta, then that's not a really good way to do it, right? So you've got to be doing that. So you've got to make sure you know your customer. I had an argument with somebody the other day with a big corporation because I think they've forgotten their customer, and he ended up blocking me on Twitter. I know I'm right.
You know you've arrived when you're being blocked on Twitter. You know that, don't you?
You've got to know your customer and understand your customer, and also remember to only cater for your customer. Don't start chasing other people's customers. You've got to make your own customer. The minute you start, like for instance, my watches, I'm very happy and I'm very satisfied and I'm very comfortable with the price range. A lot of people saying, "Oh, can you do Swiss made? Can you do?" Yeah, that's £2,000 or £3,000. That's somebody else's customer. That's not my customer. So you need to know your customer. You know, t-shirts and start making them at £10 with a lovely print, and then decide one day, you know what, I'm going to put Diamantes on them and Swarovski's crystals, and they're going to be £900. You've lost your customer. Now you're chasing somebody else's. You know, you've forgotten where you were going. You know.
Yeah, just listening to you when you were talking about hope. One of the things I thought of in reference to motorsport is back a few years ago, I kind of ended up in the born again biker. So I had a motorbike when I was about 17, like a bit of a maniac kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, just thanking God that you're still alive as a result of what you did. What I thought was fascinating was the super bikes were the same. Obviously they're all souped up, but they looked the same as the bikes you could go and buy from the garage. Yeah. And I remember I started off with a 1.2 when in born again scenario. I started with a 125, and I ended up managing to. I was in a position where I was able to buy a Ducati 916, and it was exactly the same as Carl Fogarty was riding around on. And that, for me, now obviously compare that with something like Formula One. If you're into cars, there's absolutely no chance that you can't even buy a car that looks the same.
No, but the thing is with that, I mean, again, going back to what I said earlier, you know, you race on Sunday and sell on a Monday, and bikes are probably the easier way of doing it, even though technically they're probably not exactly the same mechanically underneath. But with Formula One, and I think it's bad saying it, but the pandemic has brought Formula One down and the people involved with it a peg or two. 18 months ago, negotiating with a Formula One team was almost impossible. Now it's almost like, hey, can we talk? You know, they've come down a peg or two, and they've realized that what they need to do needs to translate into commerciality. Because for years they were just getting sponsorship money thrown at them. But I mean, the tobacco industry was the obvious one. Actually, I don't like this at the moment, and this is why I fell out with one of the Formula One guys. They're still advertising tobacco products, and I don't like that. I think it's wrong, morally wrong. Obviously, they need to have the money to keep racing and all the rest of it, but morally, it's wrong. But if with Formula One, what they're doing is they're trialing and testing different things to translate into engine technology for the cars. Hasn't translated very well because I don't know whether you know, but a road car is about sort of 15 to 20% efficient. So for every £100 of fuel you put in, you're actually only utilizing about £20 worth of fuel, because the rest of it is just wasted because the engine isn't efficient enough.
Right.
In Formula One, the efficiency is 50% plus, which is massive. But did you know that?
No.
They don't. I don't understand why they don't tell the world about that. Why they don't tell the world about what they're doing for energy, engine efficiency, that kind of stuff. So unless you're in the know, you know. Otherwise, you don't see how, a Renault going around at 200 miles an hour, £1 million car, is relevant to you, because it, in theory, it's not. But there is some relevance to road cars, and it does filter down. It does take a few years. But it does filter down. But they're not very good with telling the story of why they're doing it, and why you should have a Renault, or why you should drive a Honda-powered car, or whatever. They're not very good at telling the story. They just it's because of the arrogance of the sport, because they've always had the money, they've always had the budgets, and now the budgets have been taken away from them. They suddenly now want to listen to people, and it's annoying, but it's great when you're negotiating.
Yeah. Well, I very much look forward to see it, because I do quite like Formula One. But I get exactly what you're saying. Everything you've said there resonates even with me as a fan.
Yeah.
Okay, so running out of time then, Shami. Thank you. I mean, wow, some fantastic takeaways from that, I have to say. I always say to people on these interviews, if I can get one or two takeaways from it for my own business and my own benefit, but there's probably about 260 takeaways I've got from this already. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit in terms of if you had to give people one piece of advice. Now, I know this will be a challenge, but one piece of key advice in terms of succeeding or achieving in business, what would it be?
Listen. Literally, just listen to people. And the minute you stop listening, the minute you think, you've had a great month and therefore you are, it doesn't define you. We're always evolving. I'm always listening. I keep an eye on my social media like a hawk. If anyone has any problems, I'm on it. It doesn't matter what time of day. You listen all the time. If people are saying to you, yeah, I don't like that. I mean, I sometimes spend 3-4 weeks designing a watch, and then I present it to 4 key people who are watch people, not motorsport, just watch people. And when they come back to me and say, oh, it's horrible, what the hell's that? The proportions are wrong. It's all balanced incorrectly. Not that I've got it too wrong. And again, I don't want to sound arrogant, but you learn from what they tell you. You've got to listen to people. If people are saying that your product is wrong, change it. If people are saying that your approach is wrong, change it. If your supplier is saying that you're not paying them on time, or you're not doing things right with them, or you're upsetting them, change yourself. And if you stop listening to people, you won't get better. So and I'm saying that from experience, because I stopped listening to people, and it to my detriment. I should have admitted it earlier. I should have taken the advice. To the less experienced, I won't call them younger people, but to the less experienced people, you don't know it all. The only time you know it all is when they put you 6 foot under. Then that's all you can learn. All right. And if somebody older tells you something and says to you, no, that's not the way it's done, or this is how you should be doing it, you've got to listen. And going back to what I know, so the analytics of the website, the algorithms of the website, all the bits and the pixels that we've installed in various places. I know everything that's happening and why people aren't buying a particular product. You can see them disappearing. You can see them. They've only spent 30 seconds on a product page. So that's listening digitally. well, hold on a second, that article's boring. They're not reading all of it. They've only been on the page 30 seconds, so they couldn't have read 3-minute article. We need to change the article. You need to keep listening. And if you stop listening, that's when you won't get any better.
Crikey, what a way to end. Well, I've got to give you an opportunity to tell us all where we can buy one of your watches now, don't I? Because everybody's intrigued and fascinated, including my good self, I have to say. So tell us, obviously you've got various social media accounts and a website.
Yep, so the website's very easy. It's omologatowatches.com. And then we're on Twitter, Omologato, ORO. Facebook is Omologato straight, just Omologato, and then Instagram is Omologato watches.
Absolutely awesome. Honestly, I thought that was just amazing, and thanks very much for your time. Time's precious, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure anybody watching this will have got a lot of value out of that. So thanks very much for your time, Shami, and maybe one day I'll meet you in the real world.
Well. What is the real world? I keep looking out at it.
I've no idea. I've completely lost the plot. I've no idea what's going on.
All right.
Okay, Shami, thanks very much, mate. Really appreciate it.
Yes, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.